Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
Welcome back to Behind the Bits. I'm still Scott Curtis, and I've got Aaron Sorrels with me today. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm well, Scott. Thanks for having me on Behind the Bits.
Yes, we try to get behind the bits. We all do bits up there, and let's get behind them and see what it's all about.
The story behind the funny, huh?
Yeah. More of a serious talk about comedy, and hopefully we can get your story on here. I'm glad you took the time to talk to me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, you're a Grand Rapids guy, right?
I am. Yep. I live downtown Grand Rapids. I'm just about a mile outside of the heart of Grand Rapids.
Cool. So obviously the subject that everybody's talking about is the isolation thing. And we're recording this on April 2nd of 2020 for people who come back 2 years from now and listen to it. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we are all social distancing. How's that going for you?
Well, as the unemployed alcoholic, I'm pretty socially distant anyway. No, it's an adjustment. It's kind of tough to go from being able to interact with people live to all of a sudden being holed up and isolated. It makes things like this, connecting digitally, just that much more important.
Right. How I do want to get into the unemployed alcoholic thing, but I wanted to ask you about, first of all, your early influences in comedy. Which comics stood out to you when you were a kid or before you even started being a comic?
Just the first person that comes to mind, and he certainly wasn't the first, but just the first time I remember just rolling on the floor laughing at comedy was probably Dave Chappelle. I mean, that guy is just as funny as it gets. His ability to just transport people to a fictitious setting and tell a hilarious story is just second to none.
It's so funny how many people say that. We were talking about Garrett Ozinga, who's going to be on a future episode. He said the same thing.
Did he really?
Yeah. And
I always knew I liked Garrett.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm 55 and I missed all that. I think I maybe watched like in half an episode of that, and of the Chappelle show. And I think my son was watching it, but it just, I was working and not even thinking about comedy at the time. So it just never became something important to me. And I still haven't watched his special that was supposed to be groundbreaking. So, I've missed all that.
Yeah. It'd be worth checking out. He's a funny dude.
Yeah. So, you're a kid, you grow up. When did you start doing stand-up?
I just started doing stand-up about 2 years ago. Actually, 2 years ago in March with Laugh Fest here in Grand Rapids was the first time I ever got on stage to do stand-up. And that was after kind of a painful period in my life. About 3.5 years ago now, I left a very good job to address alcohol in my life. It had gotten out of control. It was dominating my decision-making. And I knew I had to do something, and I knew I wasn't able to just fix it on my own. So I left a good job, threw myself into a great recovery program, got plugged in with a wonderful church, and started that healing and that recovery process. Figured that might take a couple weeks and then I would get back to work. But that is not how it happened.
Yeah.
A couple weeks of unemployment turned to a couple months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, ultimately over a year of unemployment, where just every single door that I knocked on closed. I was looking at executive level stuff to entry level stuff and everything in between, and I just couldn't get a door to open. It was really painful. But then about a year into that, my wife and I are walking around downtown Grand Rapids, and we were just laughing together at a time that should have been kind of miserable. We were just laughing, and it just struck me the power of laughter and how wonderful it is in getting through rough times. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should try to get on stage and do comedy. It was the last day to apply for a spot with Laugh Fest. So that was good because I wasn't able to think about it or talk myself out of it. I just did it. And I got a spot, a wonderful spot, Friday night, prime time at Dr. Grin's, my first time on stage. And it went really well. And it completely flipped the script for what I was going through. I found purpose through comedy. My mission in comedy is now to help people laugh while highlighting recovery and faith. That's not to say that I'm knocking beers out of people's hands or hitting them over the head with the Bible, but well, that's not very effective, I found. But that is, I'm very open about who I am and what I've experienced, and that's opened up some really wonderful conversations with people.
Well, that's a neat story. So let's go back. I don't want to ask what your job was exactly, but if you could tell me kind of what you were doing before you went into treatment, what type of work were you doing?
Well, I've done a number of different things. Most recently, I was the marketing director for an equipment manufacturing company. Again, a big company, good job. Traveled a lot, did some real fun stuff with them. But I've done some entrepreneurial things in the past. I've done some management things. I've done a lot. I'm either really well versed or a mutt, depending on how you look at it.
Right. So that type of work kind of lends itself to going out and having dinner and having a few drinks and in the name of business, in the name of solidifying relationships with your clients and stuff like that. So I can kind of see a trend there, that, having a few beers on a Wednesday night to having some gin and tonics on a Thursday night, and then going to the weekend, you got to keep it going. So how many years did you experience just like a heavy drinking period that you didn't know was alcoholism before you finally decided, hey, there's something wrong here?
Boy, that's there's a lot to unpack with that question.
You got all the time in the world.
I'm sure this is hilarious so far, right? Welcome to this comedy podcast.
Now, it's a serious podcast about comedy, so
excellent.
We don't have to laugh the whole time.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's important to be able to do both. It's important to be able to laugh, and it's important to be able to share the truth behind our stories. So, I actually discovered alcohol when I was in the 5th grade, which is pretty early. I caught on quite quickly. By the 7th grade, it was a dominant part of my identity.
Okay.
I was a drinker. I was a partier. I think we called ourselves stoners at the time. That might date it, early 90s, even late 80s, bet there. But
that's what we called ourselves in the 70s.
All right. Good. But I carried that part of my identity through all my life. I mean, through college, I was a big drinker, big partier. When I started getting into the professional world, same thing like you were talking about. I don't know if it was necessary or not, but I certainly used it as a self-justification for drinking. That, hey, this is client relationship. This is networking. This is brand building. This is all that important stuff. So to answer your question of like, when did it start? Man, I don't know when it wasn't there. It's just as my early childhood memories, alcohol was a big part of my identity and who I was.
Now, were your parents heavy drinkers too? Is this a family thing, or did this kind of start with you?
There's not a long history of alcoholism in my family. In fact, my dad, who passed away December, not of last year, but the year before, he was a Lutheran pastor. And so like my mom and dad, they might split a 6-pack once a month and get halfway through it.
Yeah.
So that wasn't it. I mean, I had a good childhood. There's good, bad, and ugly in everybody's childhood, but in general, I'd say I had a really good childhood. God was a part of our household growing up. I was, the faith was a part of all that. But it, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to run into problems. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. In fact, growing up a PK or a preacher's kid, it's kind of stereotypical that you end up being a little bit rebellious and pursuing the sins of the flesh and whatnot. So.
Do you feel like that as you were getting older and into your job and stuff like that, do you feel like you moved away from your faith a little bit at that point? Just became like a lukewarm Christian or something like that? Or was that still a big part of your life? You just had the alcoholism as kind of something that you were carrying along with it?
Well, my faith walk kind of ebbed and flowed throughout my life. Kind of like I was saying, like from my earliest memories, I had a relationship with God. Jesus was my Lord and Savior. And that was a big piece of who I was. But I didn't always like Christians very much. A lot of Christians that I saw growing up, they didn't really have what I would consider a desirable lifestyle. Kind of boring, kind of lame, kind of judgmental, kind of pricks. And there's a lot of ugly that goes along with that too. I mean, my dad was the pastor, so I saw behind the scenes. I saw Christians that didn't always act so much like Christians. And then as I started my adult life, I found myself in this kind of loop where I would be drawn to a church and then I would get burned, and that's of course a very common story. It's a common thing. There's a lot of hurts that people have and are carrying around with them because of things that Christians have done or said, or
right.
used to manipulate or things like that, So I've experienced all that, and that caused me to kind of ebb and flow, I'd say, with my relationship. There were times in my life that I worked full time at a church. There were times in my life where I completely avoided it. But all the way through there, I think I have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So.
It's funny. I don't want to editorialize too much, but it goes both ways. First of all, a lot of people who are not of faith, they see Christians as one lump of people, and they're all this way, and they don't like to have fun. They don't like to laugh. They don't like to party in their own way or anything like that. And they can't understand anything that a non-faithful person would go through. And then by the same token, Christians think people who are non-faithful, we're just all having orgies all day and shooting up heroin and stuff like that.
Wait, are we not supposed to be doing that?
Yeah. but the funny thing is, and it's really kind of neat. I don't know if David's watching. Sometimes he does. We've got kind of a large group of local comics here in South Bend that do an open mic at the Drop Comedy Club. And David started coming several months ago, and he's a pastor of a local church here. And it was funny watching the young people. I mean, they were kind of scared of him at first because they were afraid they were going to offend him and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, whether you're Christian or you're non-Christian, you've heard it all. So you're not going to hear anything that you haven't heard in the past, and it doesn't necessarily offend you, even though it's not part of your ideology or whatever, and it can still be funny. So I just think it's fun. It's funny if you actually talk to somebody who is different than you, you find out you have more in common than you have not in common. So,
man, we could pretty much just wrap it up right there. What you just said right there. If you talk to people that are of a different group than you are, it's really quick and easy to realize that, boy, we've all got a lot more in common than we do apart, you know?
Yeah. It's funny. I did a local podcast here for about 5 years, and it was called Michiana People Podcast. And the first guy I had on was super right-wing conservative, and he was running against Jackie Walorski. His name was Jeff Peterman. Super right-wing, and a guy I like a lot. I'm a fairly liberal guy myself, and I just liked him as a person. I knew his dad, and I liked him as a person. And he was the first guest I had on. My listenership was pretty liberal, and I had a lot of liberal folks on too. And then somebody went back, and I had posted something on the Facebook page about an episode, and somebody commented that, he had that jerk conservative Jeff Peterman on. I'll never listen to his podcast. And I'm like, look at the rest of the episodes. I mean, I run the gamut of, conservatives, liberals, musicians, artists, business owners and stuff like that. So it's those preconceived notions that get you in trouble because you put yourself in a box when you do that.
Yeah. It's unfortunately a part of our culture and society today that, I heard somebody say that humanity ends at the end of our tribe, so the people that are, that we're plugged in with, that are part of our tribe, part of our crew, that's who we consider people. And when we go outside of that and find people that disagree with us, maybe have a different lifestyle than us or whatever, it's really easy for us to dehumanize them. And whether that's, talking about, a liberal group of comics looking at conservative Christians, or vice versa. And it's really a shame. I wish that we could all get together and disagree amicably a little more often than we do.
Once you experience talking to somebody that's different from you and you do it on a regular basis, then you find you just have a lot more in common than you thought you had. You go through this year of unemployment and you're at your lowest of low and you decide to do the comedy thing. Let's talk about that first time you got on stage at Dr. Grins. Tell me, what was that like? How many minutes did you do?
Well, I was supposed to do 5 and I did 6.
Okay. Did they come after you?
Oh yeah. I got scolded for that. I really kind of have to go back before that because I had signed up and I got my spot and I wrote my first attempt at 5 minutes of comedy. And I actually kind of performed it for my wife, which there's a whole world of problems with performing comedy to a one-person audience that you're married to.
Yeah.
But I kind of went through it and she looked at me and in as nice of a way possible, she went, yeah, that's not very good.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that she did, because then I started nerding out. I started listening to podcasts on how to do comedy. I got a couple books from the library and started watching comedy specials with a stopwatch and a yellow pad of paper and making hash marks for laughs and really started kind of breaking it down. And as I started kind of peeling back the layers and figuring out what was happening underneath, what gears were turning, I realized, wow, yeah, that first attempt was not very good. So, so I rewrote some stuff with, actually putting punchlines at the end of a sentence, and some, the rule of threes and I probably should have come up with a third thing to say at the end of that, but and I put something together and my first time doing comedy, it went pretty well. Now my second through 40th times, those didn't go as well.
Yeah.
But that first time, packed out place, 200 people, turning people away at the door, and it was a really good experience.
Yeah. Do you feel like, so You did something very important at the beginning there. You did it for your wife, and then instead of letting your ego take hold and say, "No, this is funny," you decided that you would actually do some research and find out what it takes to write a proper joke. Which that a lot of people don't do that, and you've probably seen that when you've seen open mics and things like that, and people who do open mics for 3 years and do the same stuff over and over again. But do you feel like your past business experience kind of came into play when you started dissecting your set and putting that stuff together?
Well, two things came into play there. One, certainly having analytical skill sets,
Yeah.
and I went through and earned an MBA degree, and my thinking kind of shifted when I got that education.
Yeah.
Just an analytical problem solving type mindset. So that certainly helped, but probably more so than that, I was unemployed, so I had the time to do it.
Right. Yeah.
It was. I'm 2 years into comedy right now, and I have gotten opportunities that are far past where I should be at this point. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that I had a lot of time that I've been able to dedicate to this. Most people, when they get on stage the first time, they don't have 60 hours a week to dedicate towards honing and learning the craft and all that. So,
right.
So yeah, the analytical stuff really helped out a lot. But the time was just as important, if not more important.
Right. And I concur. I feel like my time in the business world has at least allowed me to put my ego aside and say, okay, this bit just isn't going to make it, or this bit needs to be put away for a while and maybe looked at and rewritten at another time, because it's not. Yeah. It certainly isn't working now. I always give my stuff like 3 chances, and if I don't get anything in 3 chances, then it goes in the vault.
and you hit an important point there too, the ego thing. And I got to tell you, coming through the recovery process and going through a 12-step program and having that, that's a humbling experience.
Yeah.
And that and you need to be able to accept the fact that this thing that you love and have created and presented to the world as a joke is terrible.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to get past the ego and let it go. And really going through a 12-step program helped.
I bet.
Helped with that.
Yeah. Now, thinking about the fact that when you got into this, you were probably about a year sober then, right?
Yeah. About, well, no, I'm sorry. When I had applied for it, it was a year. I was about 18 months sober when I actually got on stage.
Okay. So thinking about that, you are in a bar setting, and a lot of the mics that you did post that were in a bar setting. How did that work for you with your recovering alcoholic status?
A lot of people have asked that question, and to tell you the truth, it's I have not been tempted to fall off the wagon while I've been in a bar doing comedy.
Okay.
And I think a big part of that is because I am there as the unemployed alcoholic, a comedian who helps people laugh while highlighting recovery and faith. I'm there on mission. I'm there on point. I'm there on purpose. And that has probably helped keep me sober as opposed to hindered. Now, triggers are terrible for people. Triggers are terrible for me. And I would never advise somebody to go hang out, 25 hours a week in the bars as a step in their recovery process.
Right.
But I'm in a unique position where I feel like I'm called into that environment, not just to hone comedy, but also to be a friend and companion to the folks, the wonderful open mic comedians in the area here. I really have developed some unique and great friendships that are important to me. And again, I feel like I'm called into that community to be a part of it and contribute to it.
Right. So you you had a good start, and you said, the next 30, 40 times weren't as good, but you kept working at it. And, I find the fact that you're 2 years into it and between the comedy and the public speaking, this is pretty much your vocation now.
It is.
You've obviously been able to make some sort of a living out of it. When did it go from honing your craft to deciding, okay, I'm going to be the unemployed comedian, and I'm going to do the public speaking and stuff like that? How did you make a business out of the fact that you did this one Laugh Fest deal at Dr. Grin's?
Well, first off, I wasn't afraid to do things for free because I think I did probably 200 or 250 things for free before I charged $1 for anything. Uh-huh. And it's not like I'm earning a bunch of money. I mean, I think my tax returns for 2018, I think I lost $3,500 or $3,200 uh-huh. in building this.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, it was more than that. It was like, I almost doubled it, mm-hmm. Which is great, except it was a negative number, and doubling it is bad. So,
yeah.
Right. So there, it was about $5,500 invested in building this. Mm. So, and anybody that's been around business knows that it takes investment. It's not that especially in entertainment or public speaking, you can't just decide you're going to go get paid for that. You have to do it for free for a long time, or for a lot, until you get really lucky and then start being able to charge for it. Now, January and February of this year, I had 2 excellent months as far as booking, where I had some great things come into play. And then I don't know if you remember, about mid-March, or late March, something kind of dramatic happened. The world closed.
Yeah.
And things have started, or just many things have canceled. And that's unfortunate, but I know other people that has impacted them way more than it has me. But I mean, after 2 years of building, that was a punch square in the chin, that the revenue that I had been building towards instantly went away. It'll come back, but it went away. So, I mean, I've shifted my focus. Fortunately, my mission is not solely to make money. I want to help people laugh while highlighting recovery and faith. So I'm able to do that. I'm able to do that online. My website, theunemployedalcoholic.com, there's a bunch of free entertainment stuff on that. And I'm very active on all the social media platforms. Some of it's funny, some of it's encouraging. It's just, I just try to put content out that helps people laugh or is encouraging.
Yeah, I noticed you do pretty much daily stuff, and that takes work.
Yeah. Well, again, this is one of the benefits of considering this my full-time job is I've got time to dedicate towards it. But yeah, in November of last year, I started releasing a video every single day, and then coming into January, my goal was to, in 2020, release 366 videos, one each day. And I'm on track to do that. And now I've got a groove going. So it's easier to do that. Now I've started releasing 2 things a day, one video and one piece of other content, a screenshot of a joke or something like that. So yeah, it's, I'm very consistent with it, which is helping. I feel myself, hopefully getting better at it, and more people are seeing it and falling into the rhythm and engaging with it. So
your marketing background is very evident in your social media presence. So
it helps. I mean, marketing is communication, and to have a good foundation of understanding how communication works, that's been that's been crucial in being able to do stuff.
You said something at close to the beginning that caught me, and I wanted to make sure I expand on this. You talked about after your wife told you your set wasn't that great, that you listened to a bunch of podcasts and took out some books from the library. Did any of those stick with you as being really helpful, and podcasts and books that you still refer back to?
Yeah. Are you familiar with Rick Roberts, the School of Laughs?
Yes.
Podcast? Mm-hmm. That was like my number one resource that I went to, because that, much like this podcast, that does a really nice job of kind of breaking things down and all that. So I started listening to episodes over and over again, just as much as I could find. I was listening to, and okay, this is really interesting because I randomly found that podcast, The School of Laughs, and I was listening to it. Rick Roberts was teaching me how to do comedy without knowing it. And then I was at Dr. Grin's the night of my first time doing comedy, and a guy walks up to me wearing a name tag that says Rick Roberts.
Oh.
And it was Rick. He was in town for a show with Laugh Fest, and he just happened to walk right up eyeball to eyeball with me. And I'm glad he had a name tag on, because I wouldn't have recognized him if he didn't. I would recognize his voice, but I wouldn't have recognized him in person.
Right.
And I said, "Are you Rick Roberts?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, you don't know this, but you've been teaching me how to do comedy. I'm about to get on stage for my first time ever. And we sat together leading up to the performance, and then afterwards he gave me some constructive critiques and some encouraging words, and that was great. He and I are friends now, and I'm a supporter of his School of Laughs podcast, and he's had me on the podcast as a guest and all that. But it's just really, really interesting that after a year of every door closing in my face, then I start doing comedy and the whole script flips. Yeah. Suddenly I get to meet my comedy mentor, who is at my show completely coincidentally. He had no idea who I was or what was happening. It was just completely fortunate, you know, and unplanned by us. So that was cool. And also Michael Jr. Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
Oh, he is a phenomenal comedian. He does comedy with a purpose. Really, really good dude, heavily involved with the Christian Comedy Association. And I mean, he packs places out and just brings the house down every time. Super, super funny dude. I had heard him at the Global Leadership Summit about a year before, and I heard him talk about doing comedy with a purpose, which that kind of planted the seed in me. I didn't realize it, but it kind of planted the idea that maybe I can do comedy for a purpose. And then a week before I'm going to do comedy, Michael Jr. was in town performing at a church, and one of my friends called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to be the guy to pick up Michael Jr. from the airport and drive him over to the gig?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So the week of my first time ever doing comedy, I got to meet the two people that were incredible influences on me. If Dave Chappelle would have shown up out of nowhere, that'd have been funny too.
That's a really cool story, and that the Rick Roberts podcast is a big one for me too. And I want to have him on mine, but I keep forgetting to ask. And the funny thing is I've got a lot of people approaching me to be on the podcast, and I'm doing all those interviews, and I'm forgetting to do the ones that are on my bucket list. So I did manage to get Bob Zaney in, and he's on the show tomorrow. So,
that's great.
Yeah. But, the thing with the podcast world is, right now, I can get pretty much whoever I want. And I'm getting as many of those done as I can, and, doing 2-3 interviews a week. And then I'll have things banked for when everybody's working again and they don't have time for me. So
that's great. Yeah.
So,
make hay when the sun's shining.
Yeah, no doubt. So, when you did this first one, I got to ask, because I can't tell how old you are by looking at you. How old were you when you did your first stand up?
I'm 40. What am I? I'm 45.
Okay.
Now. Yeah, that's what I am. No, I'm sorry. I'm 46 now.
Okay.
No, I am 45. Wow. I'm way older mentally.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I was born in 1975.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you were 40s when you started.
Yep. I was in my 40s, and it wasn't a plan. Like when I was 40, if somebody would have said, "Hey, are you going to be a stand-up comedian?" It just would have been so far from possible reality. There's no way. But
Okay, folks, you have been listening to Aaron Sorrels here on the Behind the Bits podcast on my Facebook page for the last 30 minutes or so. If you want to hear the rest of this interview, you're going to have to subscribe to Behind the Bits podcast, which is available on all the apps. Just type in Behind the Bits, and I appreciate you listening and subscribing. Bye. Okay, we're done live streaming now.
All right.
The last one I did.
Did you tag me in that, or is it?
I don't even know if I tagged you.
Okay. All right. I'll track it down.
So I'm 55 and I work I work in IT as a consultant, but I can't do IT for anything. But the video still stays. The video still stays there, and I can tag you in it afterwards. But multitasking, as cool. You can tell by the not hitting the record button, is not my strong suit.
Yeah, it's
too many buttons. But
good times though.
So you've put together this whole persona as the unemployed alcoholic, and your gig is, you're a clean comic and you put together shows with other clean comics and do the whole clean comedy thing. Tell me about what doors that opens for you, and also what doors that may close for you.
Boy, that's a good question, because it does both. There's a lot of folks that have a preconceived notion that, was that a pause for a minute?
Nope, I don't think so. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I thought you were giving me I didn't hit record.
No, I'm good.
Signal or something.
I stopped recording. No, come on.
Yeah. But there are people that have a preconceived notion that clean comedy is dumb comedy or not funny comedy or dull comedy, which I don't agree with entirely. Clean comedy can be pretty lame at times, but so can dirty comedy. It's, comedy is, funny is funny. And if that's in a clean environment or a blue environment, it doesn't change that. There are people that brand as clean comedy to get a little bit of cushion and sell it. But like you mentioned the clean comedy time and the shows that we do through that. What we do there, like Garrett is a good example. Garrett performs blue comedy typically, but we approached him and asked him if he can do a clean set, and he absolutely can. And he came and did clean comedy time and crushed it. Because funny is funny, and the real talented comedians can do both, like Garrett Elsinga. So the clean comedy time closes some doors because people have preconceived notions about it, but it also opens some doors. The fact is, over and over and over, I hear people say, "Oh, I love comedy. I just wish it was clean," or "I just wish you knew what you were going to get." Because people, unfortunately, very regularly have the experience of, "Oh, comedy," and they go see it, and then they're offended right out the door. So people a lot of people want to avoid that, and knowing up front that it's clean comedy helps with that.
I feel like the comedy I do is clean. I'm just a clean guy myself, and it's not necessarily my real persona, because I cuss like a sailor in real life, and my text messages don't change my don't autocorrect my words for duck anymore, because it's so used to what I normally text. So I'm absolutely, it's just what, first of all, I feel it's more difficult to fill the time and be clean, because you don't have all those words that you can put in and fill a few seconds here or there and have people gasping because you said, whatever 4-letter word or whatever phrase, or to get them to notice you. So being clean is really more difficult. But also, I feel like when I'm talking about my life, I'm thinking about my kids who are grown, and I've got a grandson now and stuff like that. I don't ever want the stuff that is recorded for me to be something that reflects something that they would be embarrassed about. That's one of the things. And the other thing, there's some preconceived notions that you can't tackle touchy subjects and still be clean. That's not true at all. I mean, you can do all of them and still be clean. And I'm sure you address your alcoholism, and you can address politics, you can address religion, you can do all of it and still be clean, and still get a message across.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, you're very branded as clean. Your shows are branded as clean. I just wondered what that did as far as opening and closing doors. And obviously, some people are a church is obviously going to be arms wide open for you, and maybe a bar or an FOP or something like that, maybe not, because they have a certain expectation of what their comics do.
Yeah, it's hard to generalize, because I've had churches look at my comedy and say that that's not clean enough, because I do clean adult comedy.
Mm-hmm.
The topics that I address are targeted towards grown-ups.
Right.
And I'll get into addiction. I'll get into the fact that I'm married. I'm not going to graphically discuss sex, but I might acknowledge that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been times when I've been not clean enough for some places, and then, like you said, vice versa too. There's I'm sure there's shows that they don't want to book a goody two shoes to come in and all that, and that's all fine.
Mm-hmm.
My comedy's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah.
But the people that it's for, they seem to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So.
And there seems to be like a renaissance of clean comedy right now. We had Gaffigan forever, and he was kind of the clean guy, and Seinfeld obviously, but we're getting some others like Nate Bargatze. He's about as clean as you can be. I've been to 2 of his shows, and the audience members is the widest range of audience members I've ever seen for a comic. You're paying pretty good money for a ticket to see him. So, that somebody that goes to see him is a fan. They know what they're getting into, and they think it's funny. So I see, guys with long hair, lots of tattoos, and lots of piercings, all the way up to people who look like me, and seeing him, and they're all laughing the same way because it's funny.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to me like Nashville has been a real hub for clean comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why that is entirely, but I know I was down in Nashville and checked out an open mic level show, and it was clean. I was amazed by it. Because that, unless it's really intentionally a clean show, that's not my typical experience with open mics. But so Nashville has produced a lot of really talented, clean comedians. That comedy scene down there has just done a wonderful job with that. And then things like dry bar comedy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have come out with specials on dry bar, and again, I think it's a national or worldwide perhaps phenomenon that people like comedy, but a lot of people have been burned by it getting a little too risque or blue or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, there's a lot of places and geographically and on the internet that have really been producing some wonderful clean comedy content.
Yeah, I was just on the Dry Bar page today because Bob Zaney's going to have a special coming out April 15th. If anybody can actually get to Dry Bar and put it out, I don't know if if they can work remote or not, but I was looking at all the specials they had, and I mean the page just goes on and on of all the specials, and they do live stuff and they do YouTube stuff too. So and it's extremely popular. When you put the Dry Bar name by your name on your website or something like that, it's a big deal. And
there's no question about it. It's an excellent organization, and they've got an incredible amount of wonderful content out there.
Right. I do want to talk a little bit about the business because, you talked about your tax returns and stuff like that. Let's pretend like we're not in a pandemic and have to stay home and stuff like that. What would you be doing right now to further yourself in business and get yourself scheduled and stuff like that? Because comics need to know that when they get to that level.
Well, all right, how can I say this without tarnishing my brand? But being only 2 years in comedy, the fact is I'm not good enough to go headline a comedy weekend at a big comedy club. And even if I was good enough, the line of people that's in front of me is astronomical.
Yeah.
So the idea of I'm going to become a comedian and then hit the road and go make money as a comedian, that's probably not realistic. Or it's not realistic for me, and it's probably not realistic for many other people that are new to it. So what I did is I tried to figure out how to collaborate with other people and create something of value to a market. And then bring that show, the Clean Comedy Time shows. That's an excellent example of that. We have 6 comedians that want to come in and do clean material, and they're good comedians. They're funny comedians, and people can come in and just have a wonderful show. But I only have to do 15 minutes, which is a lot easier, and I've got enough other talented people around me that if I come in and my 15 minutes isn't the best, there's other people that can carry the weight a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't have to completely rely on myself to carry the show, and I don't have to sell the show based entirely on myself. So that's the one thing I would say is from a straight business standpoint is figure out how to collaborate with people, and the rising tide lifts all the ships and stuff like that, because most of us are not good enough to be on our own.
Right.
And or at least not good enough to attract the kind of opportunities that you need to be successful on your own. So collaborate. And then the second thing is, for me, having it be about something bigger than comedy or something bigger than myself is absolutely crucial, because there's so much in comedy. There's so much in performance. There's so much in business. There's so much in life that is beyond my control.
Right.
That there's going to be some successes and there's going to be failures. But if there's a mission behind it, if there's a vision, if there's a passion to help people to be involved, that's going to fill some voids that frankly, even being wildly successful, would still leave empty.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you hear a lot of people, especially as they're getting up in years, talking about their past, and they said, I was, headlining, auditoriums and stuff like that, but I wasn't happy, and so that's something, if you're leading a balanced life along with actually trying to start up a decent comedy career, that's important, because when it's all said and done, you got to be happy, and you got to have contentment in whatever faith that you have, and be able to say that what I did was an extension of that instead of something I did instead of that.
Yeah.
Thinking about the what you want to do, once again, pretending like we don't know when we're going to get out of our houses and stuff like that, based on the clean comedy show and stuff like that, what would be like your 5-year plan of where you want to be in the next 5 years from now?
I wouldn't say that I have like a firm 5-year plan, which goes against a little bit of the traditional business thinking. But recovery thinking is take it one day at a time,
right?
And there's plenty to deal with in the day, and that's biblical too. To worry about today, but all that said, if I think ahead to what might it look like. A couple things that just really resonate with me is, man, there's been some wonderful, wonderful pieces of wisdom that I've gotten from the recovery community. The process of going through a 12-step program unlocks this wisdom that is just so incredibly valuable. And the fact is, most, if not all of us, really probably all of us, would greatly benefit from going through a recovery program, because we're all recovering from something.
Yeah.
But very few of us will get to the point where we're humbled enough to actually step foot through a recovery program. So at first I was thinking, boy, I'd like to be able to end the stigma around recovery and get more people to engage. But that might be too big of a challenge for me. So what I've been really thinking about lately, especially with this pandemic, is trying to figure out how to bring the recovery wisdom to people who are not necessarily going to walk through the doors of a recovery program. I just have been test driving this week with a handful of friends, where we're meeting online and we're doing what's called a social support happy hour. And we get together, and for the first 45 minutes, it's on Zoom, just like we're on now.
Yeah.
But we just have informal, just chatting, just happy hour talk about what's happening and where we're at and what's going on, and all that stuff. And then we shift into a format that's very similar to recovery groups. We shift into an open share format, where we start talking about, each person gets 3 to 5 minutes to share uninterrupted. And they can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of where they're at and what's going on. We've got some guidelines that make it a productive and positive thing. And then the other people can chime in afterwards and just give them words of support, encouragement, and ask questions for clarification and stuff like that. And so when I look ahead to 5 years down the road, who knows? But right now, the things that are important to me is trying to figure out how to share some of this recovery wisdom and some of these practices that are so common in the recovery world and so completely absent in the quote unquote real world. That I'm trying to mesh those together a little bit.
Yeah. I've always wondered if if you could put a show together that was like a humorous look at the 12 steps, and a lot of those steps aren't very humorous, but I mean, you could definitely do 10 minutes on asking forgiveness.
And if it wasn't good, then you could ask for forgiveness afterwards.
Right. I mean, but yeah, I've always wondered if that wouldn't make a decent show. And the problem is you do that show and then that material's done and you got to do another show because that's the way it goes in comedy. Comedy is an art form. It just astounds me how different it is from everybody else, because the Stones can come out and play Satisfaction in 2020 and everybody loves it just as much. But if you do a bit from last year that somebody's already heard, then they're like, get off the stage,
Yeah, it can be like that for sure. I just saw Jim Gaffigan though. He opened up Laugh Fest this year, big show at the Van Andel, and he went through pretty much all new material throughout the entire show. But at the end, he rolled into his Hot Pockets routine, and the place exploded.
Yeah,
the place just went up. It was amazing. Here's something that not only isn't new, but people have heard it so much that it's now the Rolling Stones playing Satisfaction. It's pretty cool.
Well, and that's the whole reason Steve Martin quit, was because he couldn't hear himself because everybody was yelling his bits at him, and he's like, I'll never do it again because I got too big and I'm in these arenas and everybody's just yelling my show at me, and what good is that? But it's funny, people do get that. Like Bargatze's got his Starbucks thing, and he does that at the end of every show, and people just totally do the same thing. I mean, he's not quite as big as Gaffigan yet, but I mean, it's a similar type response that, he can bring that up, and very few comics can bring that up, and they don't have that signature bit. But it's funny that it tends to be clean comics that can do that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a correlation there that those bits stand the test of time because they can be said anywhere at any time, and also they don't have a timestamp as far as being political or whatever is going on during the day that it came on. He that could have happened in 1976 or it could have happened in 2016, and it's still Hot Pockets. So
yeah.
I was really when Ray Romano did his Netflix special after we hadn't seen him do stand up for a long time. He's been doing it, but nobody filmed it. I was really impressed with the fact that he came up with, it's just all new material. I mean, it's just where he is now and where his family is now, and I thought it was neat that he did that, and he didn't have to. He's got all the money he needs. One of the things I like to ask all the comics that I talk to, what are 3 things that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started?
All right. Well, I at about 1 year into it, I think I really started to realize this. I heard a lot of established comedians say that, everything that you're going to produce in the first 2 years is going to be absolute garbage. So if, the sooner that we can accept that and do it anyway, the quicker we'll improve, I think. So, I mean, my first time doing comedy, it went really well. So I thought that's just how it was.
Yeah.
and then it was really disappointing to get up on a different stage in a different venue and have it not go well. But you got to film that and then watch it.
Yeah.
You got to run it past other more established comedians and get advice and all that. And in order to do that, you have to accept the fact that it's not really good yet.
Right.
So that's one thing I would say. The other thing I kind of touched on is collaboration. The earlier we can try to find opportunities for those around us, the more opportunities we're going to have.
Right.
Just try to collaborate and be the rising tide, or at least try to make the tide rise that helps all the ships.
Right.
It's easy to be competitive when it comes to comedy. It's easy to be comparative where, hey, how come this person's doing that?
Yeah.
But if we can be collaborative, boy, that's really good. What did I say there? I'm going to have to listen back to this because that
was good. That we're naturally competitive, and but you still need to collaborate, and I agree with that.
Yeah. So a third thing that probably just do. Get the stuff out there, get the time on stage, get the time making videos and putting them out there, even though nobody's going to watch. That's okay. Just put it out there, because what'll happen, I've got hundreds of videos on my website, and some of them have only been viewed once or twice, or maybe none ever,
Right.
But if somebody hears about me and they come to check me out, they can see a whole bunch of material. They can see the fact that, hey, I might only be 2 years into this, but man, I've got a catalog of work.
Yeah.
I've got clips from a big variety of shows. I've got these 30-second videos that I've been doing hundreds of, I've got stories that I've written and published. I've got a big catalog of work. And most, if not all of that stuff, I've put out into the Twitterverse or whatever, and nobody's ever looked at it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's do it just for the sake of doing it.
It's funny you mentioned Twitter. I really like to get on Twitter, and I do like different hashtags like comic or comedian or stand-up comedian and stuff like that. And instead of looking for the ones that are established, I look for the new ones that have like 40 followers or whatever, and watch what they put out. And I always follow them and see what they're doing, because it's really neat to watch somebody from the start. And see somebody who's trying to establish themselves. And, some of these folks call themselves a comedian, and they really shouldn't yet. But but some of them, you can see a spark there, and you can tell that just by what they're putting out on Twitter, they're probably a pretty funny person.
Yeah.
It's
Twitter.
Go ahead.
Twitter's cool. Twitter's probably the thing that I've gotten the least engagement on.
Yeah.
YouTube probably the most, and Facebook, LinkedIn. Actually, I get some traction with things on LinkedIn.
It's totally weird how social media works, because I'm actually getting more traction on Twitter with this podcast, and on the local podcast I did, it was Instagram. And, I'm hitting all of them, but, and Facebook is the least on this particular one. That's why I'm doing these live things, trying to get the Facebook presence up, because it's easier to watch a video on Facebook than it is on Twitter, because you gotta click and stuff like that on Twitter, whereas in Facebook, it'll just autoplay and all that. But, it's weird. Social media is weird. The funny thing is, you got to hit them all and see which one works, and then that one may not work 2 months from now, and it'll be something else. So.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny how you talked about your first 2 years being garbage. The only thing I say to that is, it may be garbage in the way that you presented it, but the material may be something, because I always talk about putting stuff in the vault and bringing it back out. The material may actually be fantastic. You just need to rework it and work on how you say it. The delivery is the important thing. That's
a good point too. And I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm very proud of some of the stuff that I've produced in the first 2 years, and we have to have this balance between being deceived enough to keep going,
Yeah.
and humble enough to realize that it's not done yet.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. I probably lean too far on the garbage end of the spectrum there, because it is, there's some beautiful things. There's been some beautiful moments through the first 2 years, and I'm still 2 years and a month into it. I'm sure a lot of what I'm still producing is garbage.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is Dreesen, one of the things that he told me when I interviewed him that stuck with me was that you do have to be critical. You do have to film yourself and watch yourself and be critical, but allow yourself some victories too. Allow yourself to be proud of what you did, because, there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into 3 minutes of comedy. And, and you don't know that unless you've done it. And so allow yourself to have those victories and be proud of yourself. So that's important too. The collaboration thing, I tell you, it's my memories. I've been doing it for 5 years, and I'd say I've probably been serious for about a year. The memories I have are less of the shows I did and more of the people I met and the relationships that I have with people. There's a handful of people here in South Bend. I get together with them. I do trivia at the local restaurant, and I call them to do trivia, and we don't talk much about comedy. We just do trivia together and have fun and stuff like that. And they're all a heck of a lot younger than me. But it's the relationships that I remember through that, because it's I've made a lot more friends than I ever had by starting to do the stand-up.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key to everything. Regardless of what we achieve and what we accomplish, when we look back, we'll always remember the relationships. Yeah.
I have to say that the biggest thing that I would like to do is stop saying and stop stammering when I talk, because when
I stage or in general
here.
Well, that's what the editing booth is for.
Yeah, I'm better. You know what? I got to the point where I just edit out anything that is glaringly bad, and the rest of it I just let myself stammer, so when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, okay, I gotta get better. So hopefully the audience can handle that, because everybody else is so well spoken and I'm still stammering, but whatever.
Well, we're always our own worst critic. It's always harder to listen to us than anybody else.
I hate hearing my own voice. Zany, when I interviewed him, he said I sound like Tom Bodette from the Motel 6 commercials.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I'll never get that out of my brain.
Yeah.
That is, can you say it one time?
We'll leave the light on for you.
That might be how you have to end your podcast.
Yeah, I know. Nobody's ever said that. A lot of people say my on-stage presence is a lot like Letterman, but nobody's ever said I sound like Tom Bodette. So now every time I hear myself, I'm like, oh yeah, Tom Bodette. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, this has been great talking to you. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to be on the podcast and also sharing your story. The fact that you are open about talking about your alcoholism and your addiction, and the fact that you're getting through it and using that as part of your comedy, that's much respect for that, because that's hard for a lot of people. And I'm sure it's not easy for you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's been great to be here chatting with you, and sometime I'll have to make it down to South Bend and hit some of them open mics down there.
Yeah. And I've been up in Grand Rapids a few times, and Kalamazoo and stuff like that. So, where can folks?
Once it's legal for us to connect in person, we'll have to do that.
That'll be great. Yeah, I'd like that. where can people get a hold of you and check out your stuff?
Best place to find me is at theunemployedalcoholic.com.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people think that's a joke, and I do have it interwoven with some jokes, but that is my real website, theunemployedalcoholic.com. And there's links to all the different social media platforms from that website.
Mm-hmm.
People can subscribe if they want to get an early glimpse of what's coming up the next day. I email out what I'm going to be sharing on social media the following day each night.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have done that. And of course, YouTube, that channel, I think I'm up to 38 subscribers now. So
all right.
That's just on fire.
Yeah. Well, I'm up to 8. So
are you? Okay. All right.
I'll subscribe to yours if you subscribe to mine. How about that?
Deal.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to ask, and since you mentioned your website, can you give me the history and the meaning behind your artwork on the website?
Oh yeah. The like the logo you're talking about?
Yeah, your logo. Yeah.
Yeah. That's. Well, let me give you the short version, and then I'll go into a little bit deeper version.
Mm-hmm.
But what my logo is it's a smiley face that has a blindfold that reads Unemployed Alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaning behind that is, our circumstances, my circumstances will often try to blind me to the joy and the laughter that's all around. So that's just a reminder to not let my circumstances blind me to the joy and laughter that's all around. And it's nice, and it's yellow, and it's happy. So that's the logo. But it was funny in developing that logo. It actually started as a mock-up of like a Johnny Walker label.
Oh, okay.
And it was a square logo with the Johnny Walker slash on it. And just as it started through the development process, this is what came out of it. And we went from a square to a circle, and then drew the smiley face at one point, and it was like, that's it.
Yeah.
That is the perfect rendition of what I'm doing here. I'm smiling through unemployment, smiling through alcoholism, and not missing the joy and the laughter.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm glad I remembered to talk about that, because I read the little snippet on your website, and I thought that was a very nice thing, and understanding behind the logo is important, and I thought that was neat. So
one of the other things on the website, if people want to see that logo or have one, I love giving stickers away, and I've got stickers with the Unemployed Alcoholic smiley face, and Clean Comedy Time. People on the website, there's a thing called Smiles. There's a tab called Smiles, and people can request a free sticker on that if they want. So anybody who wants one, hit me up. I'll mail it to you.
Cool. It's a great logo. Well, Aaron, thanks a lot. It's Aaron Sorrels, and you can find him at theunemployedalcoholic.com. And I suggest you check him out. It looks good. Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Thank you, Scott. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah.